Mr. Taylor, Mr. Brent, we're a peaceful people. We don't kill our enemies. We get our enemies to kill each other.
Damn you all to hell!
When Beneath the Planet of the Apes was released in 1970, America seemed to be on a precipice. The hippie movement was camping outside the White House, protesting a war that seemed to never end. Students had just been killed by the National Guard at Kent State University for protesting the invasion of Cambodia on May 4th. On May 8th, construction workers in New York would attack 1,000 students for their protests in the city. And the situation just got worse when Richard Nixon accepted a hard hat as a gift in the White House. 6 more Americans would die during a race riot in Georgia, which caused 6 deaths. More demonstrators would die on May 14th in Jacksonville, Mississippi. Many thought their voices were not being heard by their leaders or the media, and Richard Nixon escalated the war in Vietnam, counting on his madman theory to bring the Vietnamese to the negotiation table. These are very important things to know because Beneath the Planet of the Apes is just as much a product of its time as the first film. These movies had a ton to say, and if you know your history, it will be a deeper experience because you can see these parallels throughout the film. The troubled production of this film was clearly a result of the producers and a studio looking for a quick cash grab, and in truth, this film is a lot like Alien 3 in that the script was not locked when the cameras rolled. Ted Post and others like James Franciscus had to throw in as much nuance as they could secretly when no one was looking because the powers that be at Fox was experiencing a civil war over a sordid man. Everyone was thinking about the bottom line as the studio's future was in question, and the studio kept pushing faster and faster to get this film done. Producer Mort Abrahams often fought with the director and cinematographer Milton Krasner because his vision was paramount, despite him not being a writer, director, or anything beyond a bank man who sold films and was blessed enough to become a producer. There was little support to creativity, and all those in the power structure making this film, like Ted Post, Charlton Heston, James Franciscus, Paul Dean, and others, were gritting their teeth and clashing because there was little wiggle room. Even Linda Harrison was under the gun because it was her husband that was involved with a proxy war at Fox against the founder of that company. Only the smaller actors seemed content and unaware of such tensions. The fact of the matter was, the creative elements that normally defined a film was quashed in favor of a corporate product that needed to save a flailing company and it had to get out fast to make money. This alone affected this movie, and Fox would not learn from this mistake, as this scenario would completely occur again with Alien 3. Speaking of the shooting script, it was finished on April 10th, 1969, and if you remember, the film started principal photography in February, about a month and a half after shooting started. There are many elements from the script that did not get into the final film, and the first thing that is missing is the narration that began this film. And this is how the long narration went. This is the truth eternal. Whatever thinks can speak, and whatever speaks can murder. When the astronaut Taylor came first among us from a voyage in outermost space, he perceived that his ship had passed through a fold in the 4th dimension, which is time. And Taylor knew that he was older than when his journey had begun by 2,000 years and 10. But in the first days, he did not know the name of the strange planet on which he had set foot, where apes had acquired the power of tongues, while man had lost the means of speech and was dumb. Set this down. Taylor hated war, and since the apes of those times were fighting a bestial war with weapons to exterminate peaceful and defenseless man, Taylor believed that man was the more worth saving. Only when Taylor and his woman were at last driven from the city of the Apes into a wilderness called the Forbidden Zone, did he find a desert land of rock and stone, barren, unfruitful, devoid of life, and eternally laid waste by man's vilest war in man's history. And in this wilderness, Taylor set eyes upon the statue, and Taylor knew he was back on Earth, an Earth defiled and destroyed by the hand of men. Set this down. Whatever speaks can murder. This overly long narration was gladly removed from the final product, as it was just exposition for those who did not see or remember the first movie. And since the first half of this movie was basically Planet of the Apes revisited, it would be easy for moviegoers to get the basics without this narration. Originally, Taylor and Nova would see the ruins of New York and try to enter, and that was when the illusions began to stop Taylor from entering. To save the budget, they changed this to random illusions, which kind of steered Taylor in certain directions. According to the novel, Brent's full name is John Christopher Brent. The novel, written by Michael Avallone, adds very little to the movie, and what few scenes it adds to the film are pretty much identical to the shooting script, so mentioning the book in this video will be far and few between. It's pretty much a straight telling of the film and not much more. Some state that Brent's accounting of the time is an inconsistency in this film when he says 39:55.
I took an Earth time reading just before re-entry.
What'd you get?
3955.
In the original film, it stated that Taylor arrived in the year 3978. The Beneath the Planet of the Apes year must have become the new canon, because when Zira is interrogated in Escape from the Planet of the Apes, she states,
And before the white light and the tornado.
3950 something.
Blind and dying, the skipper decries that his wife and 2 daughters are long dead, and then he dies, starting the film on a morbid path that will not relent. When Brent runs across Nova, take notice that he doesn't respond to her beauty or is distracted by anything. Once he sees Taylor's dog tag, that is his mission, and it shows how different Brent actually is from Taylor. Many commentators state that Brent is a cardboard cutout of Taylor, but unlike Taylor, he is not pessimistic. He shows sorrow and empathy for those suffering around him, not just Nova. He is not a cynic like Taylor. For the rest of the movie, his mission is Taylor, and that singular purpose guides him from one event to the next, and it is a stark contrast to Taylor, who would have most likely lectured him, like Landon in the first film, for being a Boy Scout or Golden Boy who always does his duty. Due to Fox's stingy $2.5 million budget, the masks of the apes were really cut back, among other things in the film. It was decided earlier that mainly principal ape actors would have perfected masks, and the rest would have simple pullover masks. This is very evident when you see multiple apes, most notably in the gathering scene. They are blatantly masks, and it doesn't look good. James Gregory played Ursus, and he is awesome in this role. Sci-fi fans might remember him from his role in the classic Star Trek episode called Dagger of the Mind, where he played Dr. Tristan Adams. Gregory was best known for his role in The Manchurian Candidate, and would appear with Elvis in Clambake, and was in the pilot for Hawaii Five-0. When Ursus was first introduced, he had more dialogue. His opening lines were, "What I saw when I became your army commander broke my heart. I saw our country imprisoned on one side of the sea, and by the north and south and the west, by naked desert. And inside our country, we found ourselves infected by those enormous parasites, which we call humans, by parasites who devoured the fruits that we have planted in a land rightly ours, who fattened on the fertility of fields that we had made green with wheat, who polluted the pure and precious water of our lakes and rivers with their animal excrement, and who continued to breed in our very midst like maggots in a once healthy body. What should we do? How should we act?" And then Ursus would say,
The only only good human is a dead human!
As we had seen in the first Planet of the Apes film, the ape society is stricken by a class structure, with the chimpanzees at the bottom, and I do appreciate how this film expands the ape society and the world lore by showing the gorillas as brutish to the core. The orangutans are obviously reserved and diplomatic, while the chimps have little enthusiasm about anything whatsoever. And if you pay close attention, in the background of Ursus, you can see the chimp protesters trying to have a voice that will be silenced shortly. Zira is also very cool for her actions during the confab, as she stands her own ground stubbornly like the first movie. She is very principled, and it was good to see them continue that character thread in this film. One of the things I saw as a missed opportunity was that Zira and Cornellius were to be tried as heretics in the last film, and it would have been great drama to explore that at the start of this movie while Ursus rose to power. Instead, the filmmakers chose to speed the first act along, mirroring the first film to get us towards the mutants. However, I don't know why they did a steam room scene, as it really honestly doesn't look good, but Ursus makes it clear that Ape City is facing famine, partially due to the human infestation in their lands. So Ursus's motives seem to be in the best interest of his race, even though he is unfeeling towards the humans, which in itself is a commentary on war itself, as we think less of our enemies and justify our actions for the good of our own society. A funny quip that I always laugh at is when Zira calls Brent Taylor, and he has to correct her.
Taylor?
No, not Taylor. My name's Brent.
I often wondered if the film put that purposely in to remind people he's not Taylor, even though most critics of this film just relegate Franciscus to a Taylor copy, which I don't agree with. Now, in the last film, Cornelius and Zira were just about to be ruined for heresy, as I already mentioned, and they were accused by many of the orangutan leadership. However, Zaius now states that these two chimpanzees, not the council which tried them in the last film, are the future of science for the Ape City. For a long time I saw this as an error on the film's part by ignoring all other orangutan leaders. To explain this, there was a line in the script where Zaius visited the two, where Cornelius would state that Zaius intervened during their trial for heresy and saved them. However, from a different perspective, Cornelius and Zira know the truth about mankind preceding apes on this planet, and therefore they might be the only ones that know the truth that is hidden from their society, and therefore have the greatest wealth of knowledge than the other apes. Another thing that this scene shows is that Zaius is committed to the good of his society, and is passing the torch responsibly if something happens to him. Going with Ursus is a necessity, because Ursus is taking his army to the Forbidden Zone anyways, and at least with Zaius attending this venture, he can try to steer the gorillas in a more positive way.
Wait! I'd better double lock the door.
Double lock the door? What the hell does that mean? Moving on. Also, where is this target practice? In the Forbidden Zone? Still, moving on. Now, an important thing to note is that this film is the exploration below the ground of the Planet of the Apes, which was the inevitable goal wanted by Mort Abrahams. We had already destroyed New York in the first one, so we had to decide if we wanted to do shots of New York with buildings on their sides. We decided to go underground instead and keep the whole atmosphere underground, in contrast to the first picture, which was all above ground. So the entire Forbidden Zone is pretty much New York City, and the edge of the city was the subway the apes found in the first film, and the Statue of Liberty was not far off. This suggests that all of New York was buried somehow after the nuclear war. One of the silliest comments I read about about in my first video covering Planet of the Apes was a person claimed the Statue of Liberty was blown up and it landed on the shore perfectly, and I never saw the slightest credence to such a claim, especially when Abrahams attests that New York is underground and therefore the rest of the Statue of Liberty was buried underground. Once again, I'll point out that Brent is very different from Taylor. When he is in the subway, he is overwhelmed with sadness of the loss of his world, while Taylor was just angry at the sight of the Statue of Liberty and pretty cold throughout the first movie. Now, an interesting thing in the shooting script is that it is stated there was a nuclear war in 1990 and that New York was buried. It became a refuge for survivors, and that is how the mutants came to be in New York. Another interesting conversation cut from the film between Zaius and Ursus before they left Ape City was when Zaius questions Ursus about the superiority of possible humans in the Forbidden Zone, to which Ursus said their numbers are not an issue. Zaius states he's not worried about their numbers, rather their intelligence, to which Ursus politely rebuttals that Zaius' suggestion is blasphemous. Ursus doubts Zaius' resolve to ride with his army, to which Zaius states as a scientist he is curious and will therefore go. Now, Ursus has a clear intent to kill the chimp protesters, because you can see as the leader of his army, he instinctively draws his gun, but Zaius, level-headed, contains him. This is very linked to the violence of the late 1960s and 1970. It is an identical parallel to the state of society at the time this film was released. The scene where Brent tries to drown Nova is just disturbing, and it is the introduction of the mutants. It shows that no matter what the mutant humans say, they simply have zero moral compass and will force this beleaguered man to literally torture this poor girl. The craziness of these people worshipping a bomb is pure 1950s and 60s sci-fi, and it is bonkers. However, to see these folks worship destruction makes sense, seeing how they treat anything outside their circle, especially after we just saw them force Brent to harm Nova. To expand on their moral-less intentions, notice the upside-down crosses on the church doors and later the interrogation room. Some say the bomb resembles an upside-down cross, but I never saw that, as I only saw a missile with fins. Am I wrong here? Regardless, these people worship death, and they cause deaths with ease. The messaging is blatant, and it is an important theme for this movie about how civilized people justify mistreating others. In the vision on the wall, mutant children playing Ring Around the Rosie around the fountain sang, "Ring-a-ring neutrons, a pocket full of positrons, a fission, we all fall down," to which the kids would fall on their backs while Brent would be escorted past them as they fell. This is a disturbing foreshadow of the fate that awaits everyone and makes the film way more morbid. The first is easy with Natalie Trundy, who would return in Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and then she would appear in makeup in later ape films as the wife of Caesar. Jeff Corey had a list of appearances and was good friends with Leonard Nimoy from Star Trek, and most will remember him from classic Star Trek as he was in a leading role in the episode Cloudminders, and he was also in films such as Conan the Destroyer, Battle Beyond the Stars, Oh God, and True Grit. Gregory Sierra was best friends with Lamont on the Sanford & Son television show, as well as a regular in Barney Miller. His most known film role was The Towering Inferno, but his best role ever was as Felix Barbosa in the astonishingly good film directed by Bill Duke, Deep Cover. During the interrogation by the mutants, the scene would originally be longer. According to the novel, the mutants would ask more personal questions about Brent, and he would reveal that his parents died when he was young and his grandmother raised him in New York. Originally, the mutants were going to be horribly disfigured. Paul Dean, who wrote the Planet of the Apes Revisited screenplay, had this to say about it. At first, we were going to have them really mutated with monstrous noses and 3 eyes, real horror figures, but we didn't think that would have been nice for the children, and after a great deal of research, it was the makeup department that came up with the idea that if you had been radiated, all 7 layers of your skin would have been destroyed, and all that would be left was this terrible network of veins. The moment Brent mentions Ape City, notice that all the mutants storm him with questions, and they are alarmed and desperate for intel on the city. In the shooting script, there was a scene where the mutants explained their religion a little. In their eyes, time began with a bomb. After the fallout began, people took refuge in New York. Since this society is over 2,000 years old, surely they are ignorant of their history before the war, but they attest they are secure because of the bomb that will ensure their way of life will be victorious no matter what. Franciscus and Harrison is wonderful in this scene, as you can see her terror and shock, while Brent is just remorseful and guilt-ridden. The acting is not wooden in this film, even though haters might claim otherwise. Torturing Brent mentally is considered peaceful to these mutants, as if their actions are more evolved than others. This pompous mentality shines a reflection on humanity of the past, and especially the present, in that once again we justify the way we mistreat and judge others in the name of tolerance and civility. The irony of this entire film is that Zaius went with the guerrillas to make sure the operation was properly supervised, and yet had he not gone, the guerrillas would have most likely fell apart and retreated back to the Ape City because they were not bright enough to comprehend the illusion of fire. Had Zaius not gone, the world would have seen another day most likely. During the scene where Brent and Nova are at the worshipping ceremony for the bomb, in the script, Albina sends a psychic message telling him to remove his face, but Brent replies, "We can't. We aren't wearing masks." This offends Albina, as they are not following her religious ritual properly. I also love Nova's expression during the church service. Her eyes say it all. It's just like she's saying. After Brent states that the mutants tried to make him kill Nova, you can see the sincere offense Don Pedro Coley has on his face, and then he delivers one of the most memorable lines in the movie.
Mr. Taylor, Mr. Brent, we're a peaceful people. We don't kill our enemies. We get our enemies to kill each other.
The fight is really brutal. Usually when it comes to older films, I really see fight choreography with less believability, as movements are more telegraphed and obvious. Hey, I love the cheesy stuff, especially in my classic Star Trek, like the karate chop to the back that knocks out people. But this Planet of the Apes film, it's brutal and believable. Nova speaking her first line is hoarse and odd, and it's perfect. I have to say Nova is my favorite part of this movie. Her eyes, her movements, everything she did was perfect, even when she's in the background. I can't imagine another actress performing this role. In the script, Taylor and Nova would kiss after being reunited. In the Inquisitor room, it is clearly laid out that the mutants intend to drop the bomb on Ape City in retaliation for the invasion.
Do you know the range of their city?
Yes.
Set in the mechanism and wait for me.
The thing that is very unclear is if the mutants know the bomb will destroy the planet, not just Ape City. Later during their church service, it is said,
"The blessing of the Balm Almighty and the fellowship of the Holy Fallout descend on us all, this day and forevermore."
So you can make of that what you will. Originally, the apes would enter the city where all the buildings were standing in the Forbidden Zone, but for budget reasons, you can see the guerrillas are entering the underground where Brent did way back by Ape City, and not deep in the Forbidden Zone. It was an odd choice to do this and doesn't fit with everything we have seen thus far. This is compounded by the fact that you see the apes following the same path Brent took to the mutants. Knowing that the world is going to be destroyed because both sides will not even try to understand each other, Taylor and Brent decide to try and save each side from each other and defuse the bomb. It is then that Nova dies, and I have to say, it was the second most impactful death for me in all of the Ape films. I really liked her character, and I am always moved whenever I see this scene. Once again, we see a vast difference between Brent and Taylor. While Taylor is basically saying, screw them all, Brent is saying, mission first. And he will carry out this attitude till his very death at the end of the movie.
Should let them all die. The gorillas, every damn Taylor.
Come on. The bomb.
Though I have zero love for the mutants, or the gorillas for that matter, the horror of Albina taking poisoning to avoid being killed by the apes is palpable. It makes you think where the families of the mutants are, and where their children are hiding, and what fate they are fearing as the gorillas approach. Remember, this is a G-rated film. Can you imagine taking someone under 10 years old to see this in 1970? Well, I would go, if I was 10. But I'm talking about other kids. I felt really good when Brent killed Ursus, but the fate of Brent was final and unforgiving. At the end, Taylor pleads for Zaius to help, and had Zaius had any empathy or understanding, or even a hint of communication abilities, his race might have survived. But instead, Zaius did what many humans do around the world throughout time. He judged and lectured Taylor, claiming a moral high ground. The result of this is the end of the movie. When it's over, the credits have no sound. The Ape franchise was now considered over in 1970. When it was released, audiences and critics were mixed upon the film's release. While some praised its bold ending, others labeled the movie a quick cash grab. I honestly enjoyed Beneath the Planet of the Apes, but I will parrot many out there by saying it's the last batshit crazy 30 minutes of the movie that make it good for me. The first half of the movie is just a retread of the first film, and it was safe, like most movies made today. I honestly pondered about making a video about continuing my Planet of the Apes coverage because I have zero interest in ape films beyond Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Yet despite that attitude, I still have seen every single Planet of the Apes film made to date. Although the new stuff is good, I'm just not into it as much as I was the classic films. I like Beneath the Planet of the Apes, but it's my least favorite of the first 4 ape films. Still, Beneath has a powerful message that resonates loud today, especially because history in America is repeating itself, and this film is directly speaking to us now, in the mid-2000s. In the 70s, adversaries of Nixon labeled him analogous to Hitler, and yet it is the exact thing we see during the mid-2020s. If you are a Democrat, you are taught by media to hate Republicans and their views. And if you're a Republican, you are taught and conditioned to hate the Democrats. Meanwhile, partisan medias are stoking this fire. The idea of having mature, conflicting viewpoints is not allowed anymore. Even people in the middle are treated like they just don't understand, because it has to be one side or the other. People are being canceled for words. Normal citizens are being called names like incels, racists, and so on, just for not liking certain movies, and it is just as ugly as it was in 1970. Beneath's message is clear. The mutants hate the apes and won't even try to communicate with them. People in the middle are being attacked by both sides as well, even though they have done nothing wrong to either side. The apes won't tolerate humans, and therefore only destruction is the future for all parties. The ending scene says it all when Zaius is asked for help, and he lectures Taylor, who is different from him, not caring that Taylor was trying to help everyone. The fact is, when looking at this film today, it is more a thesis on tolerance and trying to talk and listen rather than shun differences. Thus, this theme in the film alone makes it powerfully important, despite it not being a masterpiece. It's telling us to mend differences, and if we're not careful, we may just destroy ourselves. With Beneath the Planet of the Apes making almost $19 million, the producers and Fox saw dollar signs, so they wanted a sequel. Mort Abrahams was no longer with the franchise after Beneath the Planet of the Apes, but Paul Dean was sent a telegram. Apes live. Sequel required. Thus, this led to Escape from the Planet of the Apes, but that is a story for another video if you want me to continue down the Apes saga. For now, this is the conclusion of yet another movie. Next up will be Predator 2, where it will be time to hunt again.
Lions, the tigers, the bears. Oh my.
If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Use super thanks, it helps.